Well, hello there. I'm Chris Angel, and my pronouns are they, them. Welcome to Allyship is a Verb, a podcast for people practicing allyship for the LGBTQ plus community and beyond.
Hello, my name is Wesley Toma. My pronouns are he, him.
This is one of those episodes that I think folks rallying against the LGBTQ plus community might say is proof of, see, deviants, sinners, how sick they are. Listen to them flaunting their sick lifestyle. Protect the children. I call bullshit. Kink is for everyone who wants it, and I'm not going to shy away from controversial topics. Some of you maybe know that by now. That said, Wesley is a relationship and intimacy coach. He's a sex educator with experience in LGBTQIA+ and kink relationships. He describes himself as an androsexual kinkster. Androsexual is a term usually meaning people who are attracted to masculinity. His work means he's exploring very intimate parts of people's lives at times, including themes like polyamory, BDSM, and sexual confidence. We met online and immediately had a great chat, so I was very much looking forward to connecting again. Here are 3 self-reflection questions to ponder during our chat, and be sure to stick around after the convo for 3 more. Number 1, what images come to mind when I think of terms like kinks and fetishes? Do I carry any judgments? Number 2, do I consider myself to be vanilla when it comes to sex, if that's something I participate in? Number 3, do I talk about consent with the people in my life? And now, our conversation. You are white, cisgender, neurodiverse, queer, polyamorous, male, a coach, and an educator. Whew! What do those intersections mean to you?
Those mean that I feel I have a fairly unique outlook on things. I come from some what most would consider external or outliers in communities, and I believe because of that, it gives me a unique perspective of how to view things and how to look at life.
Absolutely. Speaking of how you look at life, we're going to deviate so hard right now from my original conversation that I was planning to have with you. We'll get there, I promise. But I noticed you were drinking Dunkin' Donuts, like coffee. You're in Boston, right?
Yes.
Few layers here. I'm going to take us on this side quest properly. So first off, there's like this in-community joke that like gay or queer people only drink iced coffee. So like, check, like we're there. But the other thing is I saw a meme, my friend Sarah, hi Sarah, she had posted on Instagram saying that like New England folks always drink an iced coffee too. And I guess like, I don't know what I'm asking other than like, just, yeah, why is that a thing for that area?
That is a good question. I think it's the same reason that when the weather gets to about 60, we start wearing shorts. We're weird. We're just oddballs. Hot coffee is just too hot. I don't care how cold it is. It's just too hot. And it's great for like when you're outside all day. But if you're going from like, you know, the Dunks to the car to the office, it's too warm.
The Dunks?
Yeah.
The Dunks.
The Dunks, yeah.
Okay. We have those here in Colorado. I have one not that far from me, driving distance. In LA, when I was living there, we finally got them. I forget. I don't know. I want to say like 2014 or something, somewhere in there. And that was a big deal because it was the first time it had come over, you know? But yeah, it's just wild to me. I mean, and I can't remember if it's queer people or neurodiverse people. There's another joke that we always have 3 drinks near us at all times. I see you darting your eyes around your space. And I was guilty as charged this morning because I had my water, I had my cold brew, which was a mistake, and that's fine, and my orange juice. And I was like, oh. Sometimes it's okay to lean into the stereotypes.
Of course. Yeah, just for the record, I had my water, my cold brew, and pomegranate juice.
Well, there you go. Anyone listening and you also have 3 drinks, maybe you've just learned something about yourself today. You're welcome. That's great. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for going on that journey with me. Being an allyship podcast, I think, especially when my guests talk about mistakes they've made, I also want to be intentional about talking about my mistakes too. So in our first conversation, I believed kink was a binary. I was having a hard time not seeing it as like a switch that you turn on or off. But you kindly corrected me that it actually really is a spectrum. And the way you laid it out, I was like, okay, that totally makes sense. You also helped me to shift my mindset because now I'm understanding that more of us are probably kinkier than we realize, because I think there's certain parts of it along that spectrum that, have just maybe been a little bit more normalized. So we don't think, oh, that's a kink. Like, it's just not how we're walking around, like throwing it in that box. So viewing vanilla and kink as a spectrum, I guess just starting there, how do we define those 2 terms?
I think for me, the term vanilla is kind of a parachute term, but it doesn't actually apply to anybody. I think everybody lies on, just like gender, just like sexuality, everyone lies on the spectrum. I don't think anybody is 100% gay, 100% straight, 100% male, 100% female, just like I don't believe anyone's 100% vanilla or 100% kink. By definition, is using external stimulus or an external thing, i.e. a toy or a certain process to gain pleasure and excitement from. Everybody does that to a sense. If you boil it down to, and it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual, but if you boil it down to the sexual, anybody who's used a sex toy, that's technically a kink because it's an external device to gain pleasure. Mm-hmm. So on that sense, I think unless you're this person who's literally only done missionary, doors closed, shades drawn, lights off, no toys, not using hands, just kind of penetrative sex. If that's all you've done, then congratulations. You're like probably the one person who is very vanilla. But I think in a sense, everybody has either experienced or experimented on the kink spectrum in some way.
Because you've expanded my mind so much with this, I'm even having a hard time seeing that as vanilla because it still feels like external factors you're needing to set a certain mood or tone. Mm-hmm. So you're changing my world. Thank you. So then if we're thinking about kinks and fetishes, how do those differ?
So where vanilla and kink is kind of a spectrum, kink and fetish is also its own spectrum. Depending on who you talk to, depending on what kinksters you talk to, they're going to give you different definitions, just like anything else.
Of course.
In my world, the difference between kink and fetish is the difference between a want and a need. If I had, say, a car fetish, because again, it doesn't have to be sexual, or if I had a car kink, I should say, that would be something like cars excite me. They turn me on in a certain way. I don't need it, but I want it in my life. A fetish would be something that without it, I can't get excited. So people who need to do certain things to get off or do need to do certain things to find joy and excitement, that's more on the line of a fetish. And again, I don't think anybody is 100% either or. I think we all lie on the spectrum, and your kink can be a fetish somewhere along those lines. It just depends on how much you want it versus how much you need it.
So I think this is gonna absolutely take us into very controversial territory, even though this is already something that, is considered taboo. Mm-hmm. Part of me is wondering, is it problematic then when a person is a fetish, like let's say trans people, non-binary people, something like that? And at what point is it problematic?
I think anytime you're going to objectify somebody without their permission is problematic.
Okay.
Let's say you're in a relationship with a trans person, and you have had a conversation, and you have had a negotiation, and you've talked about the fact that the one person is trans, one person is cis, and you didn't get into it because you had a quote-unquote trans fetish, but maybe you want to explore a kink that you're thinking about, and if that's something that this person has consented to, I see no problem with that. However, if it's something that you're like, catcalling women who walk down the street is objectifying.
Yeah.
Fetishizing, trans people, fetishizing, especially in the queer community, fetishizing Asian descent, that's problematic because they're not giving permission to be the object.
What I'm hearing you say is like consent is really key here.
100%. Consent is everything in my opinion, it should be 100% in any relationship.
What are some other kinks that are maybe already normalized that we don't register as kinks?
I mean, the easiest one is toys. A vibrator, using a vibrator in bed. If you having sexual activity, if you do a little spanking, which, everyone spanks about once in a while, that's a huge kink. I would say fantasizing about, like, this whole thing about, like, I'm having sex with you, but I'm fantasizing about this actor or person that I like. That's also kind of falls in the kink because it is using that external stimulus.
Mm.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we do that we don't think of as kinky, but technically still falls on that spectrum.
Yeah, because I think a kink I'm familiar with that seems to be fairly normalized amongst, like, I think gay, queer, etc., like men,
Mm-hmm.
is like a foot fetish.
Yes.
Because I know sometimes people have like feet, photos,
Mm-hmm.
or foot photos or whatever, like in their profile,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. How do we continue to normalize kink? That's a big question. Yeah.
Talk about it. Yeah, talk about it. Also, for the record, foot fetishes, I believe foot fetish is like one of the, if not the biggest, most common kink out there. Not necessarily just in the queer community, but even in the straight community. It is one of the most common ones.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I really don't know. And honestly, and speaking as a person who has a foot kink, myself, I don't know why I like it. I just do. But to normalize it for me,
Yeah.
I think the way to normalize these things is to talk about them, is to be open and honest and to have these conversations, and have these conversations not only between people who have the same feeling. Like, I can have this conversation with a kinkster and it's going nowhere. But if I have this conversation with, like, someone who's vanilla, who is exploring kink or who has thought about it, I'm opening the eyes. It helps normalize it more that way. I think that's what you need to do. We need to, one, talk about it, and also remove the stigma. Everyone thinks of kinks as like these dirty, nasty, gross things, and they're not. And I think part of it is the fact that as a society, we also aren't very sex positive. So like I said, it is a tough question to answer because there's a lot of facets here. We need to talk about sex. We need to be more positive about sex. We need to be more positive about kink, and we need to just talk about it. And I think if we can do that, which is a huge ask, but I think if we do that, things would become more normalized and be better. But regardless of that, that's what I'm working towards myself. I will. That's why I go on do these interviews. That's why I love talking about it, because I want to verbalize. I want to normalize it, and I want to make it more every day. Like, who cares?
Thinking about normalizing this across the board, how will we know when we are seeing that tide sort of shift? Like, what do you think are some of the things we might see to know that that's changing?
I feel that, going back, I equate it to the gay rights, queer rights movements from like the 80s and 90s. At one time, before it was really accepted, we were a joke. The only time you saw a gay person on TV, they were the butt of a joke. They were the comic relief. They were the victim. And honestly, you can still see that. You can say that today about the trans community, still kind of in that place, and they're still working their way out of it. Kink is the same thing. If you see it on TV, for example, it's usually like, as a joke, or it's like a farcical, or it's like supposed to be for like extreme comedy. Once it stops becoming the target is when it starts to be normalized, when you can start talking about it in the everyday conversations. I know people who are kinky at work, but they can't talk about it at work because it's a major HR violation.
Right.
But they would love to be able to relate to or connect. You have, Pride or LGBTQ affinity groups at these major companies. You have that for, people of color. You have that for veterans. But if you went to your HR and said, hey, I want to start this group for kinky people, you're probably going to be looking for another job. I feel like once that becomes more accepted and people understand that just because you're talking about kink doesn't mean you're talking about sex all the time, and doesn't mean you're always being, I don't want to say offensive, but you're not saying something that people aren't going to dislike, then that's when I think it will start becoming normalized. Because what's funny is, honestly, a little bit of a sidetrack here. When I talk to other kinksters, we don't talk kink. We have an understanding. We know we're kinky. We move past it. We talk about cats. We talk about our pets. We talk about Star Trek, and we talk about silly shit. The last thing we don't talk about we don't talk about our individual kinks and how they run. I have friends that are kinky friends that I've known for over a decade. I still don't know what their kinks are, and I don't care because I'm not sleeping with them, and I don't need to know.
So in that case, when you're being with other folks who are kinksters, what does that help unlock in you, that even though you don't need to talk about it and all of that, and I understand that, I guess what does that do for you as a person, that it's important for you to be part of that community and have those folks that you're hanging out with, for example?
Same thing with having fellow queers around you, people that understand and you can relate to, people that have walked the walk, have traveled the journey with you. It's that camaraderie, it's that community, it's that feeling of equality amongst people. I think it's something that I would honestly say any marginalized group has ever dealt with. Even people of color stick together because they've been racially profiled, so they understand and they can relate to each other. Queer people stick together because we've been profiled. We know we can relate to each other, and same thing with the kinksters. And again, you look at it, it's like when I'm with my queer friends, we don't talk about gay and being gay and oh my god, I love being a gay, and we don't do that. When I talk to my neurodiverse friends, we don't talk about our neurodiversities, on a regular basis. We talk about other shit, and so it's like I think the part of it is finding that community of people, whether it's discussed or not. It's just finding a group of people that you can relate to, that if this topic comes up, you don't have to be afraid to talk about it.
Something else that you had discussed with me previously is that kink also needs to be decriminalized.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if you can share more about that and what's currently happening with where you live, because you even told me that for some things that you like to do, you have to travel in order to have access to those spaces.
Yes. As you said, I'm in Boston. Massachusetts is based on a very puritanical past. A lot of our laws in the book are from the puritanical times. One of the laws are, even if it's consensual, any kind of impact play or any kind of spanking, any kind of, whipping, that stuff, BDSM in general, even if it's consensual, even if your partner says, I consented, you can still be arrested and tried for it and found guilty for abuse because of the puritanical rules. In Boston, we don't have any sex dungeons for that very reason, because they're liable for anybody who decides to press charges. So if I want to do anything, I have to go to Rhode Island to go to a dungeon to have a little kinky fun. If you look at the DSM or whatever it is, it wasn't until this version, which came out a couple of years ago, 5-10 years ago, I think, that being a kinkster or a fetish wasn't considered a mental illness. You go to the Bible Belt, you go to the Midwest, anal sex is still considered illegal. Whether it's, it's obviously targeted towards the queer community, but whether you're gay or straight, that's considered an illegal act and you could get arrested for that. So I think we need to, things need to be decriminalized. These laws need to be taken off the books so people don't feel ashamed and they feel more comfortable exploring things. Because the way I look at it is, anytime you do stuff like this, you criminalize something like this, you kind of put a law against it, and it goes back to prohibition. You fight it, or you criminalize something, you're going to have people who are going to fight against it, but you're also going to have people who are going to be ashamed to try it or experience it, even though it's not going to hurt anybody, at least not unconsensually. So, once we decriminalize it, I think it's going to open the door to that larger conversation.
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of work to do, because I forget what the number is in Texas. I don't know if it's 3 or 5, but you can only own so many dildos or vibrators. And I'm like, really? The answer is 6 dildos. And some laws that we have are just oddly specific. Like, you can't wear blue jeans on a Sunday or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's a real one, but it's usually that. So it's just like interesting thinking about this and like what happened that like had to become a law, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, even with all of the work you and I could possibly do, and again, even though I'm not a white man, sometimes we'll just never be a safer space for someone and have to make peace with that because of what we might represent, previous experiences that person's had, etc. So my question for you is, again, as we have covered, you are a white male. And you're also at all of these awesome intersections, which we've been diving into. And of course, I don't want to ignore that or gloss over those. Though I think it's safe to say, and maybe you might agree with me, that, these two intersections in particular stick out a lot and impact how others interact with you. And so being in a space that's so vulnerable, like coaching people through relationship and intimacy concerns, especially mixing in LGBTQIA plus and kink communities, how do you create safer spaces for the people you work with? And what kind of work have you done to get there?
I look at the wheel of privilege and I fall very high on a lot of those sections.
Mm,
I know that and I accept that and I understand that. Part of me creating the safe space is the fact that I can acknowledge that. And I can acknowledge the fact that, yes, I am not only am I a white man, I'm a cis white man. And, I'm a cis white, straight passing white man.
right.
So I have a lot of things, middle class, I have a lot of things that are in my quote unquote my favor. So for me, trying to create that safe space, it's about building the trust. It's about showing, it's not be like, well, I'm safe, you can trust me. It's not about saying it, it's about proving it. It's about showing it. The burden of the ally is to show that you are you can't name yourself the ally, but you need to prove that you are the ally you want to be. You need to be that ally. I do have to work harder to gain that trust sometimes. I do have to work harder to gain that understanding. I also understand that there are a lot of things that may be discussed that I don't I can't relate to because of I tick those boxes.
Right.
And it's not about relating, it's about working with and empathizing and trying to see things from someone's perspective, but it's more like just kind of being there for them to understand how they feel through their perspective. So yeah, it is a lot more work being the ally. Allying is something that's huge, very important to me. So I find it more rewarding to I don't want to say I find it more rewarding to take that journey, but I do find it as somebody who wants to ally, who wants to be an ally for as many people as possible, I do find it relieving to have to take that trip. And I'm okay with that. So when people talk about, oh, men this, men that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. We suck. We are a terrible people. I can completely relate to that. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, not all of us, because it's not all of us, but that's not the point.
Right.
I find more rewarding when I can get through those boundaries and be the person that I'm hoping to be for that person.
Yeah, because it's tricky, even as an LGBTQ plus speaker, trainer, and consultant. A lot of the reason why I'll have a consult call with a company is because I might not be a good fit, even just
Hmm.
personality wise. I'm silly.
Hmm.
Like, I don't stray from that at all. Like, I very much own it because part of creating a safer space for me means that I help diffuse some of the crunchiness of these topics with humor. That's just how I do it. I don't do that with every single topic that I cover, but it heavily influences my work. But that might not be for every workplace culture. So I imagine there must be times where, after you've had some sort of, I assume you have like consultation calls with people before. Yeah. So I imagine there's times that you have to like refer out because it's just, yeah, like not a good fit.
Hmm. Absolutely. My first session is always free. It is that get to know each other session, learning what you want to get out of this, learning about who I am, seeing if we mesh. It's just like when you see a therapist and they tell you, if I'm not the right therapist for you, go see another therapist. And I have a Rolodex of coaches that I can refer out that if I'm not a fit, that's fine. What are you looking for? Do you want someone who identifies female? Do you want someone who is trans? Do you want someone who is AFAB, regardless of whatever?
Hmm.
Do you want someone who's not white? I have a Rolodex and I have a list of people I can say, well, talk to this person, check this person out, and see if they'll help you. And if not, they should have a Rolodex of people that they can then refer out. You do want to find the right person because anything like this, you can get very intimate, very into their personal life. And you want to make sure that trust is there in order to get the most out of the situation. Like, I don't want somebody who doesn't trust me because then they're going to tell me everything and they're not going to open up to me like they need to. And that's the whole point of it.
What are some of the ways that you approach building trust with clients?
We'll be right back after this break. Thank you for listening. And now back to the learning.
The biggest thing for me is showing that I'm not, I guess the best term to use is not going to mansplain, showing that I'm there to listen and I'm there to understand and not talk over somebody speaks leaps and bounds.
Mhm.
I know people who have said they've seen therapists that basically just talk over them the whole time. So, for me, it's not about talking, it's about listening, it's about understanding, it's about relating. And it is about showing the empathy, showing I don't understand your pain because I've not been there, but I can empathize with how you feel. And I'm sorry you feel that way. How can I help? How can we make it better? I try to show I'm compassionate and I try to show that I'm not in it just to do it. I want to genuinely help and I want to genuinely be there for you.
You had shared with me that being queer is well accepted in the kink community. We just covered a lot in our first hang. I'm just recognizing because I just keep referencing all these things. It was a really big thing for me. So I really am grateful for everything that you've shared with me. But yeah, so you had shared with me that being queer is well accepted in the kink community. And I think that's something I've picked up on. But you also stated that public spaces for it are mostly catered to cis het couples, aka folks who are both cisgender and heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm curious about why do you think that is, and what would help to queer it up?
I think for me, that comes from personal experience. I know that if you go out west to San Francisco, it is a much different kink community. There, that is more queer friendly. But here on the East Coast, it is, the dungeons and the sex places you can go are very geared towards, the cis, the straight, you know, folk, couples, and specifically couples, not even just like individuals. It's about a man and a woman, a cis man, cis woman coming in as a couple to play. The best way to clear it up is to just open the doors and not the doors are open. I can't say they're not. We are accepted, but we're not the targets. And I think that a lot of these communities, I think a lot of these places need to make it a safe space, not only for the cis het couple, but the queer trans couple that comes in, or the gay couple, the couple of lesbians or whatever. Don't just assume that they know it's safe. Show them it's safe. And I think, to me, it just makes sense on a business perspective because you're just going to open your doors up to a lot more people. It also frees up a lot of the stigma and removes of that uncomfortability. Like I said, I can go to a sex dungeon in Rhode Island, but every time I go, I'm feeling, well, I'm not their target audience. So I have that bit of doubt or a bit of, issue that I'm fighting in my brain because I'm queer, because I'm not, heterosexual. I'm not bringing a woman with me, or I should say a cis woman with me. So I feel like because of that, there's always that little bit. It would be nice to be able to walk in without having that.
Thinking back to what you said, even about sex shops,
Mm-hmm.
growing up in Los Angeles, it took me until I was in my grad school program. I was taking some sort of version of a human sexuality class. And one of the assignments somehow, I think, was that I had to go to a sex shop and I had to talk about it and who it was catered to and everything. And I'd never thought about that before. I'd been in sex shops before, but I never thought about who is it catered to. I think I've just at that point, I was just really used to things being catered to cishet folks, like you said. So it's just if I see a packer for trans people or something, or a tucker or something, I'll just be pleasantly surprised and happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember where I was living in particular, there was this franchise or chain or whatever of some of them. And so the one I entered was one of those. And really it was catered to couples that, yeah, were much newer to exploring these kinds of things. And were probably giggling and embarrassed and you had like stereotypical stuff like, I don't know, like the maid outfit or something like that, right? But then if you went over the hill to the west side, there was a place called the Pleasure Chest. And it's still there and it's in West Hollywood and I love it. And the ways that they've demonstrated that they're far more inclusive and progressive is that even the workshops that they offer for folks to go to dive into this world, they have packers. Like they have so many different kinds of things. They never, in my experiences of being there, made any sort of judgment as far as like what they thought I might be looking for. They always like asked me curious questions and made me feel comfortable. And so for some folks, maybe the best place you can find that is online. And that's not great because maybe in some ways it's good because, okay, even though I have to like buy it, usually they offer things like discreet shipping and packaging, which is great. But yeah, but then you don't really get the personal touch of being able to like, yeah, engage with someone and they can give you personal recommendations, right? Because maybe there's things that are there that you're like, oh yeah, I want to get that, but they could say, actually, you know, you might like this better, you know? Pros and cons to all of that. But for folks not familiar with the dungeons, could you explain more about like what those are and typically what you might see?
It really depends on the dungeon, but it's a lot of it is separate areas for play. You can set up tables, you have the benches, you have like, St. Andrew's cross, slings. And you go in and you can play together. You can, as a couple, go in and play with other people if that's something that was obviously discussed and consented about. Kink toys, sex toys, and sex furniture, it's really expensive. So it's a way to be able to use that stuff without having to have such the expense of like spending $1,000, for example, on a St. Andrew's cross. You can pay $30, $40 to get in for the day and play with it. It's kind of like the Toys R Us for the kink, I would say.
If someone is interested in exploring a place like that and they don't have someone to go with that already knows like the lay of the land, so to speak, how could they know maybe what to expect? Like, should they call ahead of time? Is there like a website that kind of like talks a bit more about like the process or yeah, how does all that happen?
Well, most dungeons will have their own website, just like any other business. They have a website, which kind of explains a lot of the in detail, or some detail about how it works. I find the one website that I think is top of anybody's list for fetish websites. It's also the top of everyone's not like list because it's not a great website, but it is like the website, and that's fetlife.com. You can go on fetlife.com, you can set up an account. It's like a social media for kinksters, basically. And they have a section for events. And you can look at your area for events that are happening. So you can go to an event and you can be like, hey, I'm new. And there's always going to be somebody there that's willing to take you, talk to you, walk you through it. Of anything, that's probably the best way to do it is find an event, find an activity, and go and, just be open. Like one thing I tell my clients and I tell a lot of people is we were all new kinksters at one time. We've all been in this situation where we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. We were not all born professionals or experts in this field. So we understand how you feel. We understand the situation. We understand, and especially when it comes to like something like this, we understand how uncomfortable it can be to be in a room with like a play party while people are basically having sex around you and you don't know what to do. We understand that. And I feel because of that, we tend to be a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more open and say, hey, how you doing? Oh, you're new? Okay, let's talk. Let me help you out. But yeah, I would say the best way to get started is to find, like, maybe go on FetLife or go on and just find local kinky events.
Thinking about play, we live in a very different world now. And more specifically, I'm thinking about technology. I know that if I'm going to play with someone, I feel safer in some respects having someone come to me because although I don't really want people to always have my address, I can control the environment, right? Like, I don't have to worry about like maybe hidden cameras and being on someone's OnlyFans page or something like that. So I guess, when it comes to maybe sex parties people may throw or the dungeons and everything like that, And I'm not trying to instill more fear in people, especially if like they were like, okay, considering it, and now they're like, nope, okay, fuck that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I'm thinking about these kinds of communities and how vulnerable they can be, there's negotiation, there's consent, there's communication, and some of these skills we're not great at,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a lot of work. I guess like starting with the dungeons, like are there rules about like you have to like check your cell phone at the door, or like what kinds of things are in place for that, especially if someone's like really private?
Again, depends on the dungeon. Some of them do that. Some of them have like lockers that you put your stuff in, and you can just leave it in there and lock it up and move on. But at least when it comes to like the private parties, everyone I've ever gone to, first of all, you should always vet the party you're going to.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's a trusting party, but you can know it's a more trusting party when they vet who's coming to their party. I don't go to any parties that's just open to the general public. I want to go to a party that you're being vetted. They want to make sure you're legit, you're a kinkster, you're not an asshole, you're not a creeper, and then they'll let you in. Most of the parties will tell you no photos, no cameras. You can have your cell phone, but do not take a picture without at least asking permission first.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get permission, don't post it unless asking permission first. Every party I've ever been to, every event I've ever been to, whether it was a play party or just like a get together, like we have munches where we just people just get together and chat. Again, if it's a community, and they all will tell you no pictures, don't take pictures, because again, being an out kinkster for a lot of people is not a good thing, and it's a scary thing, and it's a not only a life threatening but a career threatening thing.
Oh yeah, we just saw, what was it, the weather person get fired?
Yeah.
It was enraging because it was on his own personal time, and it was something he was consensually engaging in with other adults, and it was also not meant to be recorded.
Right.
In the first place. So like there's just a lot of violations happening there. I think he's been like such a great sport about it and how he's been addressing it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also a way of helping to normalize things. But yeah, how he's been getting treated as a result of all this, I've just felt was really unfair. And I wonder if also a piece of it too is just like the homophobia of it as well. Like it's just like another added layer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But yeah, like I said, I vet the group. The one thing, and like you said about technology, anything that I've ever done has had some sort of internet presence, either a social media presence or some sort of like chatting. You have Telegram, you have Facebook Messenger, you have Discord. Every group I've been part of usually has a group on one of those that you can join. And what's good about that as well is you can get to know people outside of the party. You can see how the experience is. If it's a bad place to be, those groups are going to show very quickly in the chats that they're not necessarily the safest space. And, again, just like anything else, there are people out there that don't have your best interest at hand.
Yeah.
No matter what group you're talking about, there are people like that. So you do have to be careful. And just like if you're with a partner and you don't feel comfortable, don't do it.
Right.
If you're at a party and you don't feel comfortable, don't stay. If something about it just feels, if your intuition is just telling you something, listen to your intuition. Even if it's wrong, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Sometimes I find, especially because I'm autistic, it's helpful to have almost like a script to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to quickly and safely exit something like that, what do you think is like a really good, quick way to just say, I'm out of here? But like without raising red flags or suspicions or anything, or having people press it further, just, oh, you know what, I gotta go. Like, what are some ways that someone could say that?
It's hard. I know some of the parties I've been to, I feel like I could have walked up to one of the organizers and been honest, like, hey, I don't feel comfortable. I'm just going to go. It's probably just me, but whatever. But if I didn't want to be that honest, I would just kind of be like, I'll be right back. I'm just going to go grab something out of my car. And then just don't come back. And honestly, most of the time, most people don't even notice you didn't come back. You're one of many, and like, especially if it's your first time, nobody's gonna even remember you. If you're there for an hour, you're feeling uncomfortable, you go to your car to grab something, and then you leave. They're gonna be like, "Wasn't there someone?" Oh, whatever, no big deal. Moving on.
I mean, I would hope as a host that you'd like try to follow up with the person and be like, "Hey, I just wanted to check in on you. Like, yeah, I noticed you left and you didn't come back. Like, is everything okay?" But Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a good host, they will. And that's, and then you can have that conversation in private, maybe over the internet, where you feel a little bit more safer to be open and honest. Even if I walked up to someone and say, hey, I don't feel comfortable, I'm going to go, I don't want to talk about it now. But maybe later, a good host will reach out later and say, hey, I'd love to know, so they can correct that issue if that's an issue they want to correct. Yes.
I love that. Yeah, I hate conflict. I'm just like, just let me leave. Like, cause
Yeah.
like I know there's like the Irish goodbye. You just leave. Just ideally, like no one notices at all. But yeah, I'd feel weird just leaving. I'd have so much anxiety coming up with something or anything like that. So thank you.
Yeah.
When you're doing your coaching,
Yes.
I imagine there are some questions you get routinely asked that you've come to expect. I'm curious about what's a question you wish people would come with more that maybe you feel like doesn't get talked about enough or something like that.
For me, the one thing I wish people would ask more about is consent and negotiation. Yeah, again, in the kink community, it's very widely used. It's very important. But I don't always deal with just kinky people. Like I work with the queer community. I even work with the straight cis community. I work with anybody who wants to work with me. And in the quote unquote vanilla world, negotiation and consent are not usually top of mind. Yes, consent is a big deal, but it's usually assumed consent until told otherwise. And that's not necessarily the best way to go. I wish people would talk about how to have that conversation, how to get that consent from people. I wish people would want to have that conversation instead of just jumping into it and feeling their way through it and hoping for the best.
I know that I've seen examples of consent being very sexy in different kinds of media.
Mm-hmm.
I think a fear, even with a previous partner, has been that my partner thought it would be it would bring down the mood, bring down like the arousal or the hotness or something of it. So I do think consent is sexy because I want to know that, I am engaged consensually with someone in whatever the activity is, even non-sexual things. And so I guess, yeah, in your experience, what are some ways that you can keep the consent sexy? Like, what are some ways that you can check in with your partner and it's not like, do you consent to this interaction? Like, yeah.
For me, it's all about the foreplay. Like I can have that conversation with someone. I can have it very, very like cold and say, okay, what do you like? What do you don't like? What's a hard stop? What are your limits? Let's move on. Or you can have the conversation. Hey, so what do you like? Oh yeah, you like that? Okay. Well, what if I wanted to do something like this? Are you okay with that? Oh yeah, no, okay, that's cool. Kind of play it up and enjoy. Make it part of the game. Make it part of the interaction. Make it sexy. You don't have. It doesn't have to be clinical. My negotiation isn't always. Sometimes it is because that's just. Sometimes it just works out that way. But sometimes it can be part of the game. It can be part of the experience. Like, oh yeah, you like it when I touch you like this. Okay. Well, how about this? Or what about that? Oh yeah. Okay. What should I not do? Oh yeah. You don't like that? Okay. That's cool. Yeah. Just, you know what I mean? Like play into it and just kind of the way I look at it. And this is the way I explain it to people is we call it play. It's a game. Like, I'm not saying like, being sex is a game, but I'm like, what I mean is like, it's fun. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to enjoy yourself. You're supposed to have fun with a person, play a game with a person, and enjoy it. So why not just make it all part of that game?
Something that I don't think it's talked about enough, and it's possible folks listening now may have not even heard of this term before, but I'm thinking about aftercare.
Mm-hmm.
And so, right, it's maybe the things you might need after you've engaged
Mm-hmm.
in sex with somebody, like cuddling or something like that. I guess, could you just talk more about that broadly?
Yeah. So aftercare, because what we do as kinksters is potentially dangerous because there are a lot of kinks out there that can be aggressive, can be violent, obviously under controlled situation, but still things that happen. There are some kinks that put you in very specific states of mind. And because of that, in order to come down from that, a lot of people need specific treatment post, what we call the scene. Anytime you have a sexual encounter, it's a scene. For me, it's a scene whether it's a kinky one or not. But in the kink community, that's what we call, having an encounter as a scene. After a scene, you need a very specific way of coming down. Like if I'm working with a sub who likes to be spanked like hard, I'm going to spank them until they're raw. But then afterwards, they may need to just like sit in a corner, just kind of decompress, or they may just need me to cuddle them and tell them that they're special, that I care about them. And, on the same side of it, as, a dom myself, I need aftercare, because if I'm going to sit here spending the next 2 hours spanking you and calling you names, I'm going to need some time afterwards to realize that I'm not that asshole. I'm a genuinely good person who's doing something to give you pleasure. I'm not genuinely that person. It's important. I think anytime any kind of sexual encounter, again, whether kinky or not, aftercare happens. And again, in the vanilla world, it's kind of assumed, you do it, there's a little bit of cuddling and talking afterwards. That's aftercare. Or you do it and then you leave right away. That could be aftercare too.
I think the imagery I get in my head when thinking about media, again, which isn't always a great place to get our information, but I think there's like the ongoing joke, first off, that cis-het couples are just always miserable and always joking about how miserable they are being married to each other and stuff. And it's like, well, maybe you're queer or something, or I don't know, go work on that, because you shouldn't hate each other that much or at all. I'll see a lot of sex scenes that end in, like, again, let's say it's cis-het, the guy rolls over and goes to sleep. I don't think that's really aftercare.
No, not at all.
And I don't think any conversation was had about aftercare. So, like, if someone's wanting to think about that and also introduce that into a relationship more intentionally, how can, like, someone even figure out what they need for aftercare? Is it just sort of like trial and error?
Kinda. It's just kind of figuring out it's knowing yourself. I think the first couple times we do things, we don't realize what we need. I don't go into a scene, or at least at the beginning, I didn't go into a scene knowing what I needed for aftercare. And sometimes I'll still do scenes that I'm fairly new with, that the aftercare is different. And I may not know what that aftercare is. A spanking scene is going to be different aftercare than, say, a tickling scene. It is kind of trial and error. I like to cuddle. I like to talk afterwards. Regardless of what it is, that's the general gist of my aftercare. I've been with people who their aftercare was literally smoking a bowl and getting out. Like, they don't want to touch, they don't want to look at, they don't want to talk, they just want to smoke a bowl and leave. And that's cool if that's what they're into. But, again, that's a conversation we had ahead of time. And I knew that their aftercare conflicted with my aftercare. So I figured out a way around it, which was, I know, like, I have my husband here. So if I'm with a partner, as an example, who wants to just, get up and go, then I will go to him for my aftercare. I will find a way to give myself that aftercare that I need without that person. Or if I can't, I just won't play with that person.
What's one allyship tip you'd like for everyone listening to consider?
You need to learn when it's appropriate to stand in front of, next to, or behind the person and support them in that position as they see fit. The best way to do it is just be straight up and blunt. What do you need? How can I support you? What do you want in this moment? And on top of that, if you take a stance and they correct you, accept it, move on, don't be offended. Just, you're right, take the step in another position as is needed.
Wesley, thank you so much for your visibility, vulnerability, and corrections. In our first conversation, I learned so much, and it was nice to be able to apply it right away to this chat because you challenged me. And while you didn't have to do that, you did, and I am so grateful. And this feels like a good time to share out that I'm on this allyship journey too. I make mistakes. I will make more mistakes in future episodes that you will hear very soon. And I want you to hear the ways that we can learn and move forward together, so you know that I am in this with you. Because allyship is messy work. And while some of these scenarios are set in a caring, supportive environment, and maybe I have enough rapport with someone that we can bounce back what seems like almost effortlessly, I know that's not always going to be the reality. We are human. Before we wrap up with the final 3 self-reflection questions, I want to take a moment to thank Julie for becoming a monthly supporter. Some of y'all already know what's about to happen. Thank you, Julie! If you'd also like to help out so I can continue to produce this podcast and get the support I need to make it. Details are in the captions and show notes. Thank you so much. And one-off donations are also welcome. No donation is too small. All right, here are the final 3 self-reflection questions for you to take with you. Number 4. Have I ever heard of the term aftercare before? Is that something I discuss with any partners? Number 5. How are my communication skills? Are there any areas that I could improve? Number 6. Have I come across the wheel of privilege? Do I know where I fall on it?
Visit allyshipisaverb.com for any resources and a full transcript of the episode.
And remember, sometimes allyship means learning when it's appropriate to stand in front of, next to, or behind someone.